we have to seek out the good. And we have to put ourselves physically in a place where we are around those who are speaking those things into our lives. We look for them. If you have rigid boundaries, you probably have trouble getting close to people emotionally. You're probably pretty defensive with your time, your energy, your emotions. You might feel alienated and out of touch. Maybe even with your own feelings and the feelings of others. The interesting thing is that these levels usually apply to our physical boundaries as well. So if you're someone who has softer boundaries, then probably in your home, you'd like to have like this wide open space. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're very rigid in your boundaries, you probably like to have things compartmentalized in your home as well. Or if you have rigid boundaries, you probably, in art, you probably appreciate realism in art more so than like impressionism, where there's like no boundaries and everything's kind of fuzzy, and you know what I mean? So just kind of an interesting way to maybe tell which way that you lean. I was thinking about it, and it'd be an interesting test. I kind of wonder if those with rigid boundaries would be more likely to say, hey, we need a border, politically, we need a border on our southern border with Mexico, It was just a thought I had. I don't know if that's true or not, but there is an ideal. And the ideal is that we are in a place where we're flexible in our boundaries. And so you have defined boundaries, and you know how to be appropriately selective in what you let in and what you let out. And in the ideal, you're not easily manipulated. You're not easily taken advantage of by others. This week we were dealing with kind of a little bit of a crisis at work. It was pretty interesting. So our CEO's assistant her email account was hacked. And what happened is he got into her email. He changed her filters so that all of her incoming emails were going to the deleted items folder. Oh, crap. So Gmail can normally tell you if, somebody's logged in from Malaysia into your account. But because he set up that filter, he or she or whoever, she didn't get that email because it went to her deleted folder, right? Then he proceeded to start sending out emails from her email inbox to all of her contacts with a link saying, hey, here's this document I want you to take a look at, and it had DocuSign, a modern company that everybody knows, familiar with. And then it took you to this page where it had like a sign-in form. And you know how nowadays you can like sign into a website with your Gmail account or whatever. And so it looked just like that. It mimicked that type of thing. And so if you weren't careful, you would go, oh yeah, just fill in my username and my email and my password. And so they were using that to gather other people's email addresses to get into their accounts. And you could see how the cycle just goes on. And I thought, man, this is just a crazy example of, of boundaries. And it's just kind of interesting watching then how she responded to this. Obviously, we had to work very quickly to put up the right boundaries, right? We had to reset the password. We had to figure out what he had done exactly. And we had to clean it all up, And even with like passwords, I think about this. Like I know people that they use the same password for everything. And they'll even tell someone, oh yeah, my password's this, just go ahead and log in, right? Anybody like that? You're like, oh, I'll give someone my password. All right. And then there's other people, like, after a situation like this, you might be like, well, I'm just going to not receive any more emails, right? Like, that would be the opposite extreme, like, rigid, like, I'm just not going to do email anymore. There's too much, like, risk in that, I'm not going to use the internet, whatever. Maybe most of us wouldn't go to that extreme. But you can see how we respond differently, and she got violated. She received basically an abuse in her email inbox, right? And so she had to figure out how she was going to respond. So we took the necessary precautions, took the steps that Google recommended for us, and I feel like we're back on the right track again. But just amazing how, if we're not careful, and I wonder if she maybe got one of those emails and put in her email address and her password, thinking that, oh yeah, this is just to get access to this. So just a real world example that I think kind of shows kind of spiritually what can happen to us as well. So I hope that makes sense to you guys there. So we need to be aware. I want to run through some different examples of boundaries in our lives. So we've talked about the different levels. Hopefully all of you are kind of like, well, I'm kind of at that place, maybe a little flexible, or maybe I've been a little spongy in this area. Whatever. I hope that you can see kind of where you've been. So here are some examples of boundaries in our lives. The first one is your skin is a physical boundary. We use phrases like, he really gets under my skin, right? Which means like that person is really annoying you. They're in a space that you don't want them to be because they bug you, right? And especially if you've been physically violated, this might be a very difficult boundary for you because you were taught by someone else that boundary did not matter. And so you might have trouble keeping that as a physical boundary. Another is our words. Our words are the main way, if you think about it, the main way that we let other people know what our boundaries are and how they can interact with us. And we had a little neighbor girl in Texas, little Kiki. And Shannon's laughing. She knows. Kiki she crossed boundaries all the time. We had to train this little girl what appropriate boundaries were at our house. And the interesting thing was, because she didn't learn that at her house, she knew, though, at our house. And after we had told her, this is what you can and can't do at our place, like you can't just walk in our house. Okay. She would just be like, oh, hi, here I am. And we're like, what are you doing here? It's a little girl in my living room. Okay. We had to tell her with our words, listen, this is not appropriate for you to just walk in our house. If you want to come in our house, you probably can, but you need to knock on the door first. And then if I open the door and invite you in, then you can walk in. That's how we clearly define our boundaries with other people. With our words, we confront people in love. We communicate our needs with others. If we don't do that, we can let others step all over us. With our words, we also make commitments or we decline commitments. The scripture says, let your yes be yes, and your no be
no.
Maybe. Thanks, Jack. It's pretty clear, isn't it? A yes should be a yes. If you are going to tell someone, yes, I'm going to do that for you, if you're going to make a commitment, then I hope that we will be a family that follows through on our commitments.
Yeah.
Now, I realize there are times, circumstances that come up, and hopefully we can honor one another enough that, hey, I have to make a change here, but I still want to honor my commitment to you, that kind of thing. But for the most part, if you tell someone that you're going to do something, follow through and be the person that does it. And let me give an example of that. Some of you have had kids and you've been in Walmart and you've had your kids screaming because they want that toy. All right? Anybody been there? All right? I want that toy. All right? If you tell them that if they